President, if you'll come join me up here on the dais. I should tell you all that we're taking President Niederhauser away from a beautiful bluebird snow day. That's his ski Friday. Yeah, he's a great skier, and I understand you grew up here in Logan, didn't you?
Yes, down on the island. Spent many years riding my motorcycle over there on the bluff over there. There was no homes on cliffside. That was just green fields for motorcyclists and whatever else that we wanted to do as youth.
I always thought that Cache Valley was the greatest place in the world to be a kid.
It was.
Yeah, I didn't grow up here. I was born here, but I grew up in Southern California. But every year after baseball season was finished, we all came up here because Mother and Dad were both from Cache Valley. We spent the rest of the summer here, and it was a fabulous, fabulous thing to be a kid in Cache Valley.
I think I went to every Aggie basketball game and football game because it was more of a social event.
Sure. Well, we had a great basketball game the other night, and the Aggies have done pretty well this year.
Yeah, we even have a player from our neighborhood, Brock Miller.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Super.
We know Brock very well.
Yeah, wonderful.
We're very proud of him.
How about Beaver? Tell us about your experiences at Beaver.
At the Beaver? Well, my brother used to be an instructor there, and my sister was an excellent skier, and we all grew up skiing at the Beaver Mountain, and occasionally we get up there as a family, and brings back some great memories that I don't think anybody here will remember unless there's some older folks. But the facelift, that was run by a diesel engine. I don't know if you remember that, Dean.
Yeah, I do.
Now it's electric.
Yeah.
So a lot of things have changed.
My first memory of...
But not a lot has changed at the Beaver Mountain.
Well, the snow
it's
hasn't
about
changed.
The same.
It's great. It's great. But I do remember myself, my first memory of Beaver Mountain. My dad was not a skier. My uncle had been in the military and had, in those days, a pair of skis that must have been like 9 feet tall. All right, I may be exaggerating slightly, but not a lot. And they were not release bindings. They weren't even cable bindings. They were the kind of skis that you had to lace your boot in. And so Dad took me up to Beaver Mountain for my first day skiing. He gave me these skis. He said, go ahead. And I got off the top of the first run up there, you know, the old run that went up the face. And I got about a third of the way down, and I said, that's it. And I took the skis off, and I walked out. So that was not the best memory of the Beaver. But I
have a pair of Ethan and I, we do some backcountry skiing. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we went over here up Dry Canyon and went up to Mount Logan and skied in the Mount Logan Bowl. And it was an awesome day, a great experience. And you've got some great terrain here in Logan. But I have a pair of backcountry skis. They're 133 underfoot, and those skinny skis, I bet they were 30 or 40 millimeters underfoot. So it just the whole technology of skiing has changed.
Totally changed. Speaking of Mount Logan and skiing, I just have to tell you that on President's Day, so February whatever 19th or whatever it was that year, 1972. My good friend Bill Murray and I, he coaxed me into climbing Mount Logan with him in snowshoes with our skis on our back and to ski down. I thought he was absolutely crazy. We left about 4:30 in the morning. We actually made it all the way to the top, and we did ski down.
So down Dry Canyon?
Yeah. Oh. Although I have to tell you, my legs felt like wet noodles by the time we got up there. But I'm so glad I have the memory because I know I could never do it today, although you may be able to do that.
Yeah, well, we went up and...
Did you get all the way up?
We skinned up right to the top. It was hurricane winds on top, but once we got off down in the bowl, some great skiing. It was fantastic.
Well, it's great to know that you're still in shape to do that. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
We want to talk a little bit about your career. This is the Leadership Forum, the lessons that you learned in leadership along the way, and what some of your motivations were to get involved in public policy, but we also want to dip into some of your public policy passions, if we could, in this hour that we have with you, and we'll want to reserve a little time at the end for some questions. But if you could just talk a little bit about some of the early influences in your life that shaped you, that caused you to want to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in accounting here at the Huntsman School, what you remember from that experience, and then why it was that you chose a career in real estate initially.
Okay. It's probably a little bit DNA. My father was the first in our family to graduate from college, and it was Utah State, a poli-sci major, and was a leader here in the community for many years. He worked for Mountain Fuel, Questar, and was the chair of the chamber for at least, I think, a couple of years, Mom. I don't remember how long that was, but he was a leader here in the community, and so I always looked up to my father and his example to get an education. I served in LDS mission, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints mission, to the Florida Tallahassee mission in late 70s, 78 to 80. When I got home, I wanted to be an attorney, and so that's where I was headed. And then in the midst of that, found accounting. And loved accounting, and Cliff Skousen was one of my professors.
He's noting Chris Skousen, not Cliff Skousen.
Yeah, well, it's
Chris
his father. It's his
Cliff
father,
is his father.
Was my instructor, and so yeah, that's obviously been at least a generation away, and so it's just exciting to see the next generation carrying on in the accounting department here. It was just, I felt like I'd found where I needed to be and excelled in accounting. Got a master's degree here while I was in school. I decided to stay and get a fifth-year degree. Passed the CPA exam and started work. Went to Salt Lake to work at Grant Thornton, international firm. There was at the time we called them the Big Eight. I think they're down to 4 now. I don't keep track of it anymore. But Grant Thornton was number 9, I believe, at the time, but had a huge presence in Salt Lake because they had bought Fox & Company. And Fox & Company had a large office in Salt Lake. And then shortly after that, I worked in public accounting for a few years, and then went to work for a regional real estate company. And the president of that company was Al Mansell. And Al and I became very good friends over the years. His company was in deep trouble when I started with them, and they didn't know it. And I didn't know it either. But my first day on the job, I was opening up drawers where bank statements were a year old and they'd never been opened. Their financial statements showed that they had all this cash and they were in the hole. And so it became a real challenge for me to help turn that company around. But together, spending long hours with the Mansell brothers, we were able to turn their organization around and became very successful. By the time it was sold to Coldwell Banker in, I think it was about 2001, they had $1 billion of sales. They'd sell $1 billion of real estate every year. They had offices all over the state. We were looking at maybe expanding into Las Vegas. So I got to know Al, and so it's very interesting to me that people are sometimes put in your way to guide you and help you in the future, and you don't even know it. But Al was a key person in my getting into the legislature.
He was a state senator himself, wasn't he?
Yeah, we lived by each other, and so we were in the same Senate district, state Senate district. And if you don't know, there are 29 Senate districts in the state, and they're apportioned by population. And so Salt Lake County has about 11, and then there's one Senate district that covers almost all of eastern Utah because it's hard to come up with the population there to meet the apportionment requirement. But Al and I were in the same Senate district, and it was on December of 2005. He had been in the legislature since 1994, and I had subsequently left his organization. He did too. He sold it to Coldwell Banker.
You started your own.
We started our own company. A gentleman named Chris McCandless and I, we started a real estate development company. And over the years, we've developed probably about 1,000 residential lots. We have focused on office buildings. And right now, we are developing a mixed-use product right in the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon, where the old Canyon Racket Club was. I don't know if anybody's familiar.
Yeah.
There's a parking garage being built there, and on top of that podium that we're building will be a restaurant, a couple of restaurants, a hotel, and an office. Now, we're not developing those. We're the master developer and have sold those spots to other developers.
Will that sign block your view?
Well, no, actually, it'll be it's been kind of an eyesore, that property, because the Canyon Racket Club was torn down about a decade ago, and so it's just been kind of a weed patch, and so it'll be a really nice development right there for Cottonwood Heights and right at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. So got into development, but we built an office complex out in West Jordan in the late 90s, and I was in my office late one night, and Al Mansell shows up. It was a December evening, and he'd been in the legislature 11 years, and he said, I'm not running for the legislature anymore, and I want you to take my place. And Al was a very persuasive guy. He'd been the president of the Senate.
Yep.
He was there for 4 years, and a great leader. He could get people to do a lot of things they didn't want to do, like run for office.
Was that part of your game plan?
Well, you know, I had thought about it. I had run for an office here at Utah State and lost. So I probably had a little bit of it in me, but Melissa was quite surprised. But we together decided that this was something good for us. And by the way, Melissa's been just a great part of what my life has been about.
Yeah.
We're a team, and we've had a great family, and we're getting a little emotional here, but it's
think of Al. Think of Al Mansell.
It's important that you have those kind of deep relationships, those long-term relationships, and I just couldn't do what I do, and she couldn't do what she does without us working together. And being president of the Senate isn't just something that I do. It affects my family. It affects my spouse, and together we had a good run in the Senate, and I served as the president of the Senate for 6 years. So Al said, it's easy. We'll get you elected very easily. We've got it all set up for you. It'll cost about $30,000 to get elected, and I'm going to keep it quiet that I'm not going to run for office, and then I'll just not sign up, and you can sign up to run in March, and everything will be just easy for you. We'll get you into office. I thought, wow, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, right? And it somehow it got leaked out. And knowing Al, he couldn't keep that quiet anyway. So everybody knew that he wasn't running. And we had 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats sign up to run. And there's several of us there. A couple of them were multimillionaires that decided to run and could throw a lot of money at the race. And so it became extremely difficult for me. What I thought was going to be kind of a glide into office became the hardest thing I'd ever done times 10 in my life to get elected. We had a delegate and convention system. I don't know if you're familiar with that here in Utah, and we've modified it over the last couple of years where you can get on the ballot with signatures. But the only way to get on the ballot when I was running for office was going to convention and convincing a bunch of delegates that you were the right candidate for the Republican Party. I'm Republican. So anyway, I lost in convention, to Bryson Garbett, now a dear friend of mine, and he'd gotten 59% of the vote. If he'd gotten 60% of the vote,
He'd have won it.
he would have gone to the ballot
nomination.
directly. But
Yeah.
I had forced a primary now
Yeah.
by about 2 or 3 votes.
Yeah.
And in the
But you were number 2, so you cleared the deck of the other 3.
That's right. They were gone.
Yeah.
And so it was just us 2 running for to be the Republican candidate. And I had an amazing consultant. He was telling me how to run a campaign, and it seemed completely different than what I thought we should do. I wanted to knock on every door, talk to everybody, try to convince them to vote for me. And he said, "No, you got to go to the doors of people that vote, because primaries are not people don't come out for primaries, and so you have to identify those houses and those people that actually vote in primaries and go visit them." And I was obedient, and I did what he told me, and we won the primary 58 to 42. And then I went on to win the general. Was really close. I had a very astute Democratic opponent, Tricia Beck. She was an amazing candidate, and it was very close, 52 to 48. And in all that, I spent $240,000, not $30,000. And I was able to raise $100,000 of that. So I came out of my pocket with $140,000, which got paid back over time. I loaned it into the campaign, but I just hadn't anticipated. And about halfway through, I'm saying, this isn't what I signed up for. But I was determined to see it through. And it became an amazing experience for me to serve the constituents in Sandy, to represent them, and that's what you're there for, to represent your voters, and then to have my colleagues and my peers elect me to be the president of the Senate, to have that for 6 years, and that just opened up so many doors for me. There's an association of Senate presidents. It's called Senate Presidents Forum, and I got involved in that. All 50 states and some of the territories that have Senate presidents belong to that organization, and they elected me to be their chair for 2 years. And so my last 2 years in office, I was the chair of the National Association of Senate Presidents. And just the relationships that I was able to develop. I just got back from Colorado, where I spent 2 days with a friend of mine who was a leader of the Senate in Texas. He's got a house in Winter Park, and so Ethan and my other son Christian and I went over there, and we had a ball with Troy Frazier, former legislator from Texas. In January, Melissa and I went to I call it a coronation of Mark Norris. He was the leader of the Senate in Tennessee, and he was being made a federal judge. And so we went up. That's the kind of relationships that we developed, that I would spend time in an airplane, go over and stay in Memphis in the winter. Memphis in the winter is not a great place, by the way. And just to support Mark Norris in what his new ventures were in life. And that's the kind of relationships that were developed over that time across the country. Just amazing to now have some lifelong friendships that I hope we'll continue to have contact.
Can I ask you to talk a little bit about working across the aisle here in Utah? In Washington today, nobody lives in Washington anymore, so you don't socialize, you don't know people. But here in Utah, we do. Yeah, in the legislature, you do know these folks, and you see them outside of the intense period where the legislature meets. Does that make a difference in terms of are the Utah legislators able to work a little bit more cooperatively as a result across party lines?
We do. So let me just say it this way. when I was Senate President, we have 29 senators, and 5 of them are Democrat. So we're not talking a lot of people that are on the other side of the aisle. But I chose, as Senate President, not to make our Democratic friends irrelevant, because it'd be very easy. We had a supermajority in the Senate, and there was a supermajority in the House, and it's still that way today. I wanted to make sure that all voices were heard. And so I actually helped our minority leader on several occasions, that's Senator Davis, Gene Davis, worked through some issues. We got a number of Democratic bills passed. And if you go and look at Karen Maine's record, Senator Karen Maine from West Valley, a Democrat, she passes more bills than the Republicans do. Now, they pick bills that the Republicans will vote for. There are some bills that those are non-starters. So it isn't quite like, just this easy across the aisle relationship. But we learned to work together. They learned to work within in this supermajority. We had press conferences together, the minority party and the Republican Party, every day after our floor time. And so it made for a better process. It made for better legislation to include all our colleagues in making public policy.
Let me ask you a little bit about some of the issues that you were most involved in. Recently, Utah State University and President Checkered has announced research landscapes. I know you're familiar with that. A focus on using Utah State University researchers and research to help influence land, air, and water in the state. 3 really important issues. And I'd add another one to that you're particularly involved in, and that's infrastructure/tax policy. Could you speak a little bit about those issues, which are so important to our state?
Yeah, I was probably the first to raise this flag about 6 years ago. I was newly elected president of the Senate. And because of my CPA background, I was probably as familiar with the budget as anybody in the legislature. And by the end of my 6-year term as Senate President, well, they're actually 2-year terms, so I was elected 3 times, but I probably knew more about the budget than anybody and what levers to pull to make things work. And there's the transportation fund, there's the general fund, and there's the education fund, and there's some constitutional restrictions on those funds. And knowing what levers to pull are very important. And most legislators really didn't care much about the budget, but I learned very early that that's where the power is with the money. And you can pass bills all day long, but it's the money that really drives the policy. And so I became very familiar with the budget, but I was noticing, and we get instructions a lot from a lot of very intelligent people. Natalie Gochner, she used to be Levitt's economist, Governor Levitt. She runs the Kem Gardner Institute now. But we were hearing from Pam Perlich from the University of Utah and others who do a lot of economic research that we were going to double in population in the next 30 to 40 years. And the demographers had been right over the last 30 or 40 years, so I believe that we are going to be doubling in our population. And I don't know where you're from, the students here, but if you live along the Wasatch Front, and even here in Logan, it's changed a lot since I was a young man here growing up. There's more congestion, there's been a lot of growth. You go out to Nibley, there was nothing in Nibley. And now you've got subdivisions there. So think about twice as many people living on the Wasatch Front. Think about that for a minute. Or twice as many people living here in Logan. How does that feel? What does that look like? How are we going to, is that going to change anything? The legislature started in 1996 in a very aggressive policy to fund roads, to create the infrastructure, because without the infrastructure in place, business can't prosper. You can't get around from point A to point B. And we have spent billions and billions of dollars on road infrastructure in this state, and we have more congestion than we ever have had in the past, which means that we're not going to keep up with building more and more roads and bigger roads. That isn't going to work. We're going to have to look at creative ways of transportation. That's active transportation.
What do you mean by active?
Active transportation is, bicycling, walking.
Yeah.
Those have to be part of the future. Transit has to be a big part of what we do. I suspect, though, that technology will help us solve some of those problems. There's autonomous vehicles. That idea, or at least that technology, is far from perfected as far as I'm concerned. But if you can get cars running on the road talking to each other in a safe way,
Yeah.
you want to make sure it's safe first, you could probably almost double or triple the amount of cars that can go on the same highway, on the same freeway. So maybe technology will solve it, but I don't know if we can necessarily count on technology. So we've got to be proactive today about putting the infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, it's not just roads. You've got water infrastructure. We got to develop the water. We have to conserve the water because there won't be any more water with the doubling of population.
Right.
We'll just be distributing it different. And maybe we even have less water. Climate change, we don't know whether we're going to have more water or less water. But the doubling of the population means we've got to take that same water and divvy it.
We got it.
Distribute it to twice as many people. Yeah. So those are our challenges. Yeah. And then I've also, and it's interesting that Utah State has a recreational degree here, is that we love living in Utah because Beaver's 40 minutes away.
Right.
And where I live, Snowbird is 15 minutes away from my house.
When it's not congested.
And I love, when it's open.
Yeah.
For avalanche control. And so I love where I live. I mountain bike on some of the most amazing trails in the world, out in Corner Canyon, and Moab's not too far away. We have a great resource in our public lands. And so when we're talking about infrastructure, we're also talking about recreational assets.
Right. That's right.
In the summer, try getting into Arches. Try getting into Zions.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
I told you I grew up in Southern California. And I have to tell you honestly, we used to go up to a little place called Idlewild, which was up on Mount San Jacinto over Palm Springs. And it was up at about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It was fabulous up there. It got snow, there were pines, and there were streams. But they didn't develop it the right way. They let everybody in. They overran that place, and now there's no riparian water up there at all. And it just feels like a desert. And I'm concerned that, the old phrase, don't Californicate Utah. I'm a little concerned with you, and I know you are, that we'll love these assets to death if we're not
deeply
careful.
Concerned. And if we can develop the recreational assets, it has less impact than just people going in there willy-nilly and creating trails and having access. But if we develop it, it has a lot less impact.
How do we do that? How do you think we should be proceeding?
this is a start.
Yeah.
So the legislature has made some progress here, but it's slow so far. Senator Okerlund, 2 years ago, passed a bill, and it added just a little bit of additional tax to the hotel tax, but it creates $5 million a year. And it goes to the Office of Outdoor Recreation. Tom Adams is the director of that. And they now take that $5 million a year, it's probably up to $6 million now, and they will give grants to local governments, cities, counties who are developing trails as kind of some seed money, some gap money to help finance recreational assets. So it's kind of a good start,
Yeah.
$5 million, but I can tell you we need 10 times that amount of money to address the recreational infrastructure assets that we need to address here in the state.
Yeah.
The same with transit. 2 years ago, SB 136, sponsored by Senator Wayne Harper. I was deeply involved in that bill. Actually, it was last year that we passed that bill, where the state has left the development of transit up to the local governments, mainly counties, and they created the UTA, Utah Transit Authority. But that's not going to be the long-term solution for Utah. The state of Utah has to put some money into it. And we got the bill passed out of the Senate with $80 million of revenue, and the revenue was actually stripped out by the House, that dang House. And we ended up with maybe like $10 million of money now going into that account. But if we're really going to address our transportation issues, there needs to be a couple $100 million plus going into that account that will be used as grant money to help the locals with their transit issues.
Sure.
And that's going to be busing, that's going to be trains. We've got to look at electrifying the front runner. It'll make it a much better system than a diesel system. It's able to, it's much more efficient because it can speed up faster and slow down quicker. And so those are some huge investments that Utah is yet to make for our transportation issues.
Well, you were also a leader as it related to issues having to do with Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon down in the legislature. And some of the things I know you put forward, you haven't quite been able to get all the way there yet. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. So if you're familiar with Little Cottonwood Canyon, it is the most dangerous avalanche road in the world. Above Tenner's Flat, the road was built on the north side of the canyon, right in the path of 20 prolific avalanche chutes. And so UDOT has to, for the safety of the public driving up to ski, they have a howitzer at Snowbird and a howitzer at Alta, and they shoot artillery shells across the canyon to keep the snow loosened up and keep it from building up to where it would create a situation where we'd have huge avalanche. It would take out cars and whatever else on the road. And so they're very careful and are very judicious to make sure that that road is safe. And so the canyon is closed on some of the most beautiful powder days, in the winter. Yeah. The canyon sometimes is closed to 11 o'clock or noon because they're doing avalanche control, so it's safe for you to go up to ski. And it's a frustration for people. I'm very close to Dave Fields. He's the general manager at Snowbird. He gets emails from people that said, "We came to ski the greatest snow on earth, and we could see it a mile away, but we couldn't get to it because of traffic." And so traffic up those canyons has become just a major issue. And so I took it on about 2 or 3 years ago to try and help solve that. there was an effort was called Mountain Accord, where we looked at building a train up Little Cottonwood Canyon, through a tunnel over into Big Cottonwood Canyon, and then another tunnel over into Park City. It's a $2 billion plus project. That's pie in the sky. That's not even close to what we're going to be able to afford here in Utah. And if we were going to spend $2 billion relieving congestion, you probably would do it in the valleys and not up the canyon. And so some of the things that we're looking at right now is some snow sheds, which are really just tunnels where the most prolific avalanche paths are.
They have those in Switzerland.
Yes, they do. And I think the environmental community has come around to the idea that we're going to need to do something like that. And this may sound outlandish, but one of the proposals is to do a gondola up the canyon. So there would be a staging area at the mouth of the canyon, and you wouldn't even drive up anymore. You would hop on a gondola. It would take about 20 minutes. And they can put more people up the canyon on a gondola than they can with a bus system.
Really?
So those are some things that will be looked at.
What about the idea of a entrance fee to the canyons? We have a cabin up Big Cottonwood Canyon, and the traffic is getting crazy up there as well. But the idea of a meter at the base of Big Cottonwood Canyon, maybe a little bit like what has been done in some of the other canyons in Salt Lake. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah,
or electronic metering, maybe?
The electronic metering, because of this problem, as president of the Senate, you don't usually run legislation. You usually, if somebody comes to you about a legislative idea, I'll refer them to one of the members of the body to run the legislation. But this was important to me because of Little Cottonwood Canyon and Big Cottonwood Canyon. I'm very close to the Cottonwood Heights city leaders. And I lost my train of thought a little bit.
We were talking about electronic metering at the base.
So I decided we needed to upgrade the statute for tolling. And I took it on, and now I got it passed so that UDOT will now be able to, in their environmental impact statements, address tolling. And so this is not a booth along the freeway. This is not a booth in the mouth of the canyon. Electronic tolling, and that could be reading your license plate, that could be a transponder, it could be all kinds of things in the future as technology will help us take care of that. And that is part of the answer to the question. There is no way that we can put more cars up Little or Big Cottonwood Canyon at this point. And so it's got to be metered. It's got to be measured.
Do you think that's...
And it's going to be by tolling.
Is that generally pretty well felt now? Just a matter of implementation?
People are coming around to it, but they hate the idea of tolling.
Yeah, sure, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you don't know, and what most Utahns don't know, is the gas tax is one of the main revenue streams for roads here. But it only comes to pay for about 55% of the roads. So when you go to the pump, you're only experiencing about 55% of the cost of you driving on the road. It's subsidized by general fund money, $600 million a year. Now, for you economists out there, think about this. What happens when you subsidize something? You incentivize more use than you otherwise would have. And so what we've done by allowing that policy to continue is we're incentivizing more use for the roads than otherwise would be there. So you have to build bigger roads artificially. And first of all, we can't afford them because they're very expensive. And so I feel like we have to have a user fee for driving on that road. And that's in the future because of electric cars and alternative fuel cars. It's not going to be the gas tax. The gas tax is going to go away. Yep. It's going to be some kind of tolling. And we hate the idea, but it's not reality.
Yeah. Well, on that hopeful note, let me open up the floor to some questions. We've got about 15 minutes or a little less. And let's invite our audience of students and faculty to ask any questions that they'd like to President Niederhauser. This has been a wonderful tutorial, by the way, in public policy. Thank you for that. Who's got the first question?
Just make sure to state your name and your major. I actually have a question.
Please.
I'm
State your
Jordan
name.
Bell. I'm studying business administration. My question is, with good people that kind of stray away from running for any elected seat, how do you deal with the persecution or like the mudslinging in current politics today, and how do you persevere through that?
Wow, I was pretty soft-skinned when I started to run for office in 2006, but I had to thicken up pretty fast because there's no way to escape it. And one of the things that I also learned and exercised as president of the Senate is don't try to hide the ball. The press or somebody's going to sniff it out and figure it out. Yeah. So it's just best to be transparent and upfront right from the beginning. And so we, every day, we had in our press conference, we had the Democrats, we had the Republicans, and the press loved it because it was a off-the-cuff, unscripted interaction with the media and the public as a result on what we were doing in the legislature, and we were very transparent and truthful about what was going on. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but there's no way to escape it. You're going to be trashed at times, and I have been trashed many times. My daughter-in-law, I'll just give you an example, she would help me occasionally, and after this has been a couple of years ago, she says, do you look at the Facebook comments on your Facebook page? And I go, no. She goes, somebody called you a douche canoe on there. And I thought, well, what's a douche canoe? I guess if you have douche in the word, you know that it's not good.
Not good.
But somebody called you a douche canoe. So, and then I had an intern one time that was tweeting for me. And she, bless her soul, she was great. I appreciate her very much. But kind of got caught up in doing some tweeting in my behalf and sent out a tweet that created a firestorm. But we deal with a lot of policies that people really get upset about, and people are not civil. And we're not living in a society that is real civil when it comes to politic issues.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Which, always be respectful. You're going to get farther in public policy, in your advocacy, by being respectful and being civil. Because I would just block out those other voices.
Yeah, right.
Also, can I just say that for Ethan and I...
Bring Melissa the mic so that she can be heard.
Really, this is just... I'm not political, but I will say that it's hard to hear that as a family. And I would think, do you understand that this person has children and a wife who love him and think he's wonderful, and they're calling him these names? And so we stopped taking the paper ages ago, which most people have, but when we had it and there was a columnist who would just blast him, Ethan and I would just take a red pen and draw little devil horns on him. And we felt better.
Yeah.
So we weren't going to call that person out, and it's that respect. And he would go to a town hall meeting and start out, if you can't be respectful here, then I'll shut this down. And I think that he probably had the most respectful town hall meetings of anyone, because you've got to take that, you've got to have that strength to say, this is what we're doing, and but it's hard on a family, and you learn to just be thick-skinned and know that there's going to be a point where it's going to end. So.
There's one in the back. Again, if you'd please stand up and state your name and your major.
My name is Mark Jenkins. I'm an economics major. My question is, when you were running initially for office, I'm sure the other candidates were well-meaning individuals. They wanted to do good as well. I just wanted to ask how you thought about and how you personally felt towards these candidates that you were running against.
Well, they're outstanding people, by the way. And what happens a lot of times in these races, and to some degree it happened in that race in 2006, but it's not really driven by the candidates. It's a lot driven by those who are trying to get them in office. Yeah. They'll send out flyers that are very scathing against other candidates, and it's kind of a sad thing. You take the Mia Love, Ben McAdams race last fall. There was all kinds of mudslinging going on there, but they're both very outstanding people that I have a lot of respect for, and very good people. And a lot of that's all just twisted. And you've got to set that aside and get to know the candidates and get to know who they really are, and not just listen to third party who are advocating or trying to persuade you another way.
That's right. That's right.
Good question. Well, somebody's raising their hand. Melissa mentioned town hall meetings, and I had town hall meetings during the session every year where we would invite the whole community to come out. And the people that come to those meetings are not the people that are satisfied with what's going on.
They rarely are.
And so, no, yeah, they're there. Some come just to watch. So scout troops would come in. And so I would be facing people that were mad at something, or who wanted to, who were sometimes emotional. And I said flat out, this is a civil process. And I'd say it this way. And this is part of the public forum. And if you're not civil, I'm going to ask you to leave. And these are the rules. Is we will speak respectful. We won't catcall those who are talking. Because I had some people almost get in fights
really
over taxes or teachers or something. And I'm not a big guy. And I'm trying to get in between them and separate them apart. And those are the kind of things that happen. And so I just learned to be very strict and very forthright and just say, these are the rules, and you're going to leave if you're not civil.
Yeah. Let me ask you finally, our mission here at the Huntsman School is to develop leaders of distinction in the worlds of commerce and public affairs. You've worked in both of those worlds. Do you have any advice to our students about what they ought to be thinking about at this stage in their career, or maybe another way of framing the question, if you could go back and give some advice to the Wayne Niederhauser of 1982, what would you say to him?
Don't do stupid things. No, I mean, you make mistakes, but here's some of the things that I've learned. Mm-hmm. And you can take these things too seriously. So seriously that you get upset. And in a way, you lose some function, some functionality. Hmm. And so some of the takeaways for me has been being respectful. And as a legislator, you're not the be-all, do-all, end-all. So people would come to the president's office, and it's a beautiful office in the Capitol. And they'd say, can we come into your office? I always made it a point to say, it's not my office. it's the office of the president, and I get to use it while I'm the president. And that's the proper perspective that politicians should have, because it's very easy to get caught up in the power, the attention that you get as a legislator. You know, people are there trying to get your vote, and you can be courageous and bold and humble at the same time, and that's the right mixture. I think that arrogancy really should have no place. Narcissism should have no place really in politics. It would run a lot better if people would just be a little more humble, but yet courageous. And those are some things that I learned as a legislator, and I made mistakes. And fortunately, you have to get I wasn't the one that was making it alone. And so the system is set up with checks and balances to make sure that bad things don't happen, because it has to go through a process. You have to get 15 votes in the Senate. You have to get 38 votes in the House, and you have to have the governor agree with anything that you do. And I love part-time legislatures, by the way. There are some full-time in this country, like in California, in Pennsylvania, and New York. But they don't have to be full-time. We, in 45 days, accomplish all that needs to be accomplished in a year for the state. And we pass a budget. And we do it in 45 days. Texas, one of the most populated states in the country, do a biannual legislative session. So you don't have to have full-time. I talk to legislators in those full-time states, and we have to be here. We have to do all this. Texas proves that you don't.
Keeps you connected to your real world.
And, you know, I have to go and make a living. As president of the Senate, almost a full-time job, I made $25,000 a year. It was the 90-10 rule. I spent 90% of my time making 25% of the money, and my business, I was spending 10% of the time and making 90% of my income. And that is so healthy. And so never get rid of the part-time legislature here in Utah, and make sure the session is short. Because you lengthen that out any more than the 45 days, they'll just pass more bills. And we don't need to pass any more bills. We need to pass a budget, and we need to address critical public policy issues. And if we get out of the session with that, we've been successful.
President Niederhauser, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to ask you, Robin, would you bring that over here? I'm going to ask you to join with us just for a minute more, because we have a special presentation. You know, once or twice a year, we recognize special alumni of this college with a Professional Achievement Award. And this year, we're very honored, President, to recognize you with that award.
Thank you very
and
much.
The plaque that we're giving you is our motto, which was a comment that President Theodore Roosevelt made, and I can't think of anything more appropriate and fitting given the comments that you made today. And I'm just going to read it here. It's far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those timid spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. You've known a great deal of victory and a little bit of defeat along the way. For your ethical leadership, for your entrepreneurial spirit, for your lifelong loyalty to Utah State University and the Huntsman School, congratulations, President Niederhauser. Thank you. Let's look out before. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.